Okay, guys, this is lesson 7.6, 100 as a denominator. And with this lesson, we are moving, using fractions still, but we're moving closer toward dealing with decimals. All right, this is a picture of a hundreds flat. We use these when we talked about place values, so it's 10 squares across times 10 squares up, representing 100 little squares, right? So each little square represents one part of the whole, and if my whole is 100, then it's 1/100th. Now that's something we want to talk about real quick. 100th. So this TH right here is the most important part about when we're talking about fractional pieces of 100. So we have to add that TH, just like we say fourths, fifths, sixths. We have TH on the end. That lets us know that we're dealing with a fractional piece, and these are hundredths. So if I were to count all of these squares, it would be 1/100, 2/100, 3/100, 4/100, 5/100, 6/100, 7/100, 8/100, and on and on and on till we get to 100 100ths, and that would be our whole, right? Okay, so let's take a look at these. We have some hundredth grids, and what we're going to do is we're going to write an addition equation with two fractions that have the denominator of 100, and they're going to add up to equal 100 100ths. So I'll do an example first, and I'll let you take some time to do one. So we want them to equal 100 100ths. So on my first grid, let's go ahead and try 65 100ths plus 35 100ths equals 100 100ths. And now let's shade in our grid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each column represents 10, right? Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 65. 1, 2, 3, and 5 would result in us coloring in our entire grid of 100. So 65 hundredths plus 35 hundredths equals 100 hundredths. All right, now I'm going to give you a few seconds to create your own addition equation that will equal 100 100ths. Okay, so hopefully on like a scratch piece of paper you figured this out. You obviously might not be able to color in because you don't have a hundredths grid there at home. But let's pretend we do 42 hundredths plus 58 hundredths equals 100 hundredths. And now we will shade in 10, 20, 30, 42. And 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 8 to equal 100 hundredths. All right, so those are some examples of how we can create addition equations to equal 100 hundredths. Okay, so this one we're going to use and model we're going to add up 3 fractions to equal 100 100ths with these grids. So let's try 23 hundredths plus, let's do 51 hundredths plus, I'm going to move down to this model down here. 23 plus 51 is 74. So then 26 hundredths would equal 100 hundredths. All right, let's shade in each grid. So 10, 20, and 3. And then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 1. And then 10, 26, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that equals 100 hundredths. Okay, now I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to look at this grid and figure out how many pieces, how many squares are represented in fraction form of the whole. Okay, hopefully you could see that there were, 73 hundredths. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take that 73 hundredths and we're going to decompose that into a couple different equations. So let's start with, we could decompose this to 70 100ths plus 3 100ths equals 73 100ths. And remember, there's lots of different ways we could do this. We could do 23 hundredths plus 50 hundredths to equal 73 hundredths. We could choose to do 10 hundredths plus 10 hundredths plus 10 hundredths plus 40 hundredths plus 3 hundredths to get the same thing of 73 100ths. All right, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to look at these grids, hundredth grids, and see if you can record the fractional amount that is shaded. All right, now, you may have said one of two different options, and they're both correct. So you could have looked at this as there's 1 whole plus 1 whole plus 14 100ths. So that would be 2 and 14 hundredths. The other one that you may have done was you would have thought, well, this grid represents 100 plus 100 plus 14 equals 214 hundredths. And both of those are correct. They both mean the same thing. One is a mixed number, one is in fraction form, right? This one right here, if you're gonna, the correct way to say this one is 2 and 14 hundredths. This plus sign right here is when we use the word and. Now the correct way to say this one is just 214 100ths. There's no and in there. The and is a plus sign, which would tell me I'm dealing with a mixed number. So you have to be careful when you're reading numbers to not place the word and in a number where it doesn't belong, right? Okay, now we're going to go ahead and decompose this in a couple of different ways. There's lots of options. So maybe the first one we'll try 1 plus 1 plus 14 hundredths is the same as 2 and 14 hundredths. Maybe we could try 100 hundredths plus 100 hundredths plus 10 hundredths plus 4 hundredths equals 214 hundredths. And we could also try, let's see, (100 hundredths plus 100 hundredths plus 14 hundredths, 214 hundredths. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and work on our worksheet. Just follow along the best you can. And here we go. What fraction does each grid represent? Okay, I'm going to zoom in. These are kind of small. Number 1, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whole columns of 10 plus 2, which would be 62 hundredths. All right, number 2. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 columns plus 3, so 93 100ths. Number 3, we have only one column plus, so that's 7, so 17 hundredths. All right, number 4, let's close this up. We can have a couple different answers for number 4. So let's look at this. We have 1 whole plus 1 whole plus 1 whole, so that's 3 wholes. So 3 and 1021 hundredths. Or we could have 100, 200, 300, 21 hundredths in fractional form. So mixed number and fractional form. Okay, number 5 says decompose the fraction 85 100ths in at least 3 ways. Okay, so let's try 70 hundredths plus 15 hundredths equals 85 hundredths. We could try 80 hundredths plus 5 hundredths equals 85 hundredths. And we could try 50 hundredths plus 35 hundredths equals 85 hundredths. All right, are you understanding how to break down these and decompose these fractions? There's lots of different options. Okay, number 6, decompose the mixed number 4 and 31 hundredths in at least 3 ways. Okay, one way, let's do 2 plus 2 plus 31 hundredths equals 4 and 31 hundredths. Let's try 4 plus 15 hundredths plus 15 hundredths equals 4 and 30 hundredths. And let's try 3 plus 1 plus 29 hundredths plus 100. We got super crazy there. Equals 4 and 31 hundredths. All right. So now this is the school to home side where you can take a minute on a scratch piece of paper to try to solve these by yourself. This is good practice rather than just watching me do the problems. So you can go ahead and do that on a scratch piece of paper. I'm not going to collect these or anything. It's just for your practice. Practice is good so that you can learn the concepts.